Okay, so you've been arguing with your partner quite a lot and you've told yourself that you want to get better at communication, managing your emotions, and being less reactive. So you tell yourself that the next time an argument's brewing, you're going to listen more, be more empathic, discuss things like well-adjusted adults. Then they open their mouth, right? And they begin talking literal nonsense. They're taking zero responsibility, blaming you for everything, or completely twisting reality. And you disagree so deeply into your bones that you think, nope, I actually can't sit here and listen to this. So that plan to be less reactive and listen more and empathize more goes completely out the window. You revert to telling them they're wrong, and we're back to that same old 3-hour escalated chaos. I hear you. I really do. So today I want to introduce you to something called cognitive empathy and how you can use it to stay calm and de-escalate arguments even when your partner's talking some frankly delusional stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about the two different types of empathy, why cognitive is a far better choice than emotional empathy when you strongly disagree with someone, and how to use it not only to manage your own emotions, but also to kind of disarm their defenses and make them more open to listening and actually hearing what you have to say. So often when we hear the term empathy, we're actually talking about a type of empathy called affective or emotional empathy. This is a type of empathy where we see that someone feels sad or embarrassed and we reflexively feel a bit sad or embarrassed too. So this emotional connection is created between us, which makes it easier for us to understand where they're coming from and feel more motivated to accommodate them and try and understand them more, try to ease their discomfort. So we're told that we should try and cultivate empathy with our partners even during arguments because it tends to make us more understanding, patient, and cooperative. And that is true. The problem is that this type of empathy is fairly automatic, right? That is, we don't have a lot of control over it. It's difficult to consciously or forcefully cultivate it if it's not there. And it's far more difficult to activate if either you or your partner is angry. And here's why. So part of the reason we feel empathy towards someone is because we have something called mirror neurons in our brain, which fire when we see someone else perform an action, and they fire as if we ourselves were performing that action. So when we see someone exhibiting body language associated with shame or sadness or loss, these neurons fire and we tend to mirror that body language, which helps us to feel a bit of what they might be feeling. It makes it easier for us to understand and emotionally empathize with what that person's going through. Often though in arguments, these more vulnerable emotions tend to be masked by more aggressive emotions like anger or frustration, right? Because we're trying to protect ourselves. So then our mirror neurons are detecting and mirroring angry, frustrated body language and emotions. This is very likely to signal to our amygdala, this is a part of our brain within our limbic system, that there is a potential threat in our environment. Then instead of activating affective empathy, we're actually activating our fight or flight response, which is designed to protect us from threats. And if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, from the perspective of our ancestors, if you detect a threat in the environment, such as an aggressive animal, you actually don't want your brain to activate emotional empathy, right? Like if you walk up to a polar bear who is hungry and aggressive and try and pet it and say like, hey, it's okay, I get it, you're hungry. This is not going to go well. So it makes sense that our brains instead activate behaviors which help to protect and defend us. But where does that leave us in an argument with our partner? Because now we are stuck in this cycle where our fight or flight response triggers body language, speech patterns, and behaviors which activate and exacerbate their fight or flight responses. And now we're stuck in this aggressive cycle where neither of us have the capacity to listen or reason. But there is actually a second type of empathy called cognitive empathy. So these different types of empathy are distinct phenomena mediated by distinct brain regions, right? It's not just a difference in terminology. In fact, psychopaths have been found to struggle with affective or emotional empathy, even though they can still demonstrate cognitive empathy, which is kind of terrifying. On the other hand, people with autism spectrum disorders sometimes struggle more with cognitive empathy, even though they still might experience emotional empathy. By the way, struggling with emotional empathy when you're angry does not make you a psychopath, okay? We all struggle with it when we're angry, which is why I want to encourage you to focus more on cognitive empathy instead. Okay, so what is it and how can we use it? Cognitive empathy is the ability to reason logically about someone else's perspective, beliefs, or emotional state, even when you don't feel it yourself. So it's the ability to understand how this person came to feel the way they do and behave the way they did, even though we may have never felt or behaved that way ourselves. So why is it so far superior to affective or emotional empathy, and how can I use it? So the reason we tell people to demonstrate empathy is because it tends to lower someone's defenses by reassuring the survival mechanisms in their brain that their needs and opinions are safe. Right? They will be genuinely heard and considered rather than dismissed. And when this happens, that part of their brain that tells us we're in a threatening situation begins to calm down. Our needs are no longer threatened because we are confident that this person sitting in front of us cares about what we need and is open to hearing us out and is going to take those needs into account, right? So I don't need to be so aggressive in pushing my needs and opinions. So cognitive empathy allows us to provide that feeling of safety for their brain, even when we strongly disagree and can't actually emotionally relate at all, by shifting the goal within the conversation. So in order to practice this, we need to make a conscious shift from persuasion to data gathering. So from trying to persuade them that they're wrong or mistaken, to trying to understand how they came to believe what they do and how those beliefs are making them feel. We are temporarily letting go of the emotionally driven goal to get our own needs met to the logic-driven goal of trying to understand a puzzle. So let's take an extreme example. Let's say that I'm a behavioral scientist interested in learning more about how serial killers are created because I want to develop ways to prevent or catch it early. In order to do this, I'm going to need them to be willing to talk to me and to talk honestly. I'm not going to get the information that I need from them by going in there and arguing with them that killing is wrong and their belief that, all women are evil is wrong, etc., etc. Instead, I'm going to need to detach emotionally and demonstrate that I am genuinely interested in learning more about them and their perspective, which is true. But this in no way encompasses any kind of obligation to agree with them, condone their actions or opinions, or to feel anything for them. I want to understand them in a very clinical or mechanical way, and I want you to try and adopt the same detached clinical approach when your partner seems to hold really irritating opinions or when you just strongly disagree. Okay, so the first thing I would recommend doing is trying to enter a state of what we would call detached curiosity. And there's a number of ways you can begin to cultivate this state over time. You can begin by telling yourself something along the lines of, look, I think they're completely wrong. I don't agree in any sense, but it would actually be a waste of time to try and argue right now. They're not in the right headspace to hear me. So instead, I'm going to focus my energy on trying to understand and gather data on exactly what it is they do believe, where those beliefs come from, and how it affects their emotions and behavior. Okay, so we're aiming for detached curiosity and data gathering. The next thing I recommend is telling your partner what you're doing. Like, just be honest. Say something along the lines of, look, I think we see things really differently and I don't think we're going to agree here, right? But I will try and understand your point of view better. So let me try and do my best to hear you out without arguing or trying to push my own opinions and just listen. That in and of itself is going to help disarm that fight or flight state a little bit because we are reassuring them that we have no intention of dismissing their needs or opinions. And it's also going to dampen your fight or flight system because you're telling them from the outset, look, yes, I'm here to genuinely listen, but I'm also under no obligation to agree or change my own opinions. The third thing we're going to do is experiment with what we call open questions and clarifying questions. Remember, we are shifting our goal from persuading or getting our own opinion across to calming their defensiveness and collecting information. So when we speak, it needs to be in line with those goals. So some of the types of questions we can ask are, hey, can you tell me a bit about how the situation seems from your perspective? From your perspective, why do you think X happened? what's the most difficult part of all of this for you? I guess I'm struggling to understand what you mean when you say X. Can you explain it a little bit more? Okay, so when I do or say X, like how do you tend to interpret that? When it seems as though I'm doing X, how does it feel? Is it more like A or B? So I've also created a list of open and clarifying question ideas if you want some extra help with knowing what to ask and what to avoid asking, and I've linked that for free in the description. Remember, at no point do I need to say I agree with or condone anything that they have to say. All I need to do is show a genuine curiosity in their perspective. All we're trying to do here is disarm their brain's defense mechanisms by demonstrating a genuine willingness to explore their position, even if we strongly disagree. The biggest barrier you're going to face here is timeline expectations. It's probably going to take longer than you expect. So you're going to be there trying to respect them and be genuinely trying to understand them, and initially they're going to still be responding really reactively and defensively. So try to adjust your mental timeline a little bit. Remember, these defense mechanisms and communication patterns became habitual over a really long period of time. So it's going to take a while for their brain to trust this new approach and relax. So your goal isn't to get them to kind of come around within a single conversation. It's to, over time, create an environment where both of your brains can relax. So it might take a few conversations for them to kind of be able to relax a little bit and be comfortable enough to feel open to reciprocating and hearing you out in the same way. Let me know in the comments section how it goes if you do try this, and if you have any questions or difficulties with it, I'm going to do my best to help. If you're still watching, I assume that you found this interesting, so if you feel like paying it forward with a like or a subscribe, that would really make my day.